Hello and welcome to the Kubernetes Case Files commentary. I'm your host, Glen Simon, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Katarina Brookfield and Mike Foley, both tech marketing architects for VMware. The Kubernetes Case Files is a kind of a more whimsical way to talk about app modernization in the context of a fictional detective story. The story plays out over a series of episodes, and this episode, I believe, is episode 5, so let's get started. In the latest episode, our detective interrogates a gentleman by the name of Mole, a frustrated IT pro who doesn't quite know what to make of this new Kubernetes trend. For our conversation today, I'd like to talk about what it takes to building this Kubernetes platform. So first let's start. A lot of modern development takes place in the public cloud today. So why might you want to have a Kubernetes platform on premises?
Well, number one, I didn't realize I needed to bring my fedora for the detective show. Yeah, so I think one of the big things around why to have Kubernetes on-prem is there are, with every customer that we've spoken with, there are unique challenges. No one customer is the same as the other. And for lots of customers, they want to have more control over the data that is being used. So they want to leverage a trusted platform that can do Kubernetes. And that's where vSphere with Tanzu really plays a great role in. We've already gone through all of the qualifications and certifications for things like FIPS and so forth. And speaking as the former security guy in the vSphere group, security is a big thing. I mean, it's one thing to roll out Kubernetes or a new platform. It's a whole other thing once the security team finds out about it and starts throwing all sorts of requirements onto it. And so that from that standpoint, that might be a very good reason to run on-prem. Katarina, do you have any other thoughts?
Yes, I think the other thing to consider here is shadow IT. It's a term that we are all very familiar with. And it's when your IT teams are choosing maybe public clouds to deploy their applications to, just because it may be quicker, convenient, or a better place for applications. However, that comes with its own challenges. As IT, we like to see some kind of policies being applied on government and security, as you have mentioned. And with these, it would be quite difficult to keep this all under control.
Mm-hmm. So security, maybe shadow IT, different business lines of business kind of doing their own thing.
I think we could probably lump that all under the term governance, right? Mm-hmm. It's some level of control over where your data is going. Mm-hmm. Is my developer sending something out to a cloud vendor that they just thought was really cool, but yet you dig into it and find out they're shooting everything from the hip and it's really crazy? Are they taking advantage, or if they're sending it to a known cloud vendor, are they taking advantage of all the security or other governance around it, multi-factor auth, et cetera? And then, like I said, some customers, large banks, governments, so on and so forth, they don't even want to push some of their data out to the cloud. So that might be a very positive reason to remain on-prem. The other thing we should also touch upon is that, lots of people start out with, oh, the cloud is cheaper, right? I don't have to run IT anymore, which is a complete fallacy on both counts. It's the cloud from an expense standpoint is just shifting it from CapEx to OpEx. It's still an expenditure. Right. And while the cloud brings lots of benefits, it also brings lots of major changes in the way you do your work. And, that's why things like using vSphere on-prem and VMware Cloud on AWS or other VMware Cloud offerings, you have the common underpinnings of vSphere. So you're not doing things like refactoring and everything else. So there's lots of really good reasons to go to cloud, but there's also lots of really good reasons to stay on-prem.
Okay.
Just to follow up on, the costs, the other thing to consider here is the data transfer. In a lot of the scenarios, you have to pay for the amount of data that you are transferring in and out of the cloud to your on-prem. So that would be another thing to consider, why it may be wiser to keep data locally to you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, let's say I'm kind of like what you're talking about. It kind of made me think of maybe highly regulated businesses. Maybe they have more of a need to keep a certain number of their workloads on-prem. So let's say we've decided, let's say Legacy Bank here has decided, yeah, we need, let's build a Kubernetes platform on-prem. Who should build it? Who should manage it?
I think the advantage with solutions that are coming onto market now are that your internal teams may be well capable of building these platforms for you. Traditionally, if you would look at building your own Kubernetes platform, it may be quite difficult, and it may need a very specific skill set to do these solutions. However, with solutions like vSphere Tanzu, we are bringing this closer to the current skill set that your IT teams locally have, helping them develop something that, using the skills they've gained over the years with vSphere and translating that to maybe building platforms that are able to run Kubernetes as well.
Yeah, so that's an absolutely perfect point. You already have a lot of very smart individuals in your IT environment that are running vSphere, have been running vSphere for quite some time. For them to move to vSphere with Tanzu is not a huge lift and shift. It's a logical progression of a new workload that is just created and managed differently, right? So without diving too deep into the technical mumbo jumbo, you're not having to learn a huge new skill set or hire new people to adopt new workloads. And from a business standpoint, that just makes logical sense, as opposed to, I need to hire, 7 new Linux people who are knowledgeable in Kubernetes, and they're going to build out an environment that, who is going to support it? Oh, well, they are. But what if they leave, right? Whereas vSphere with Tanzu, you already have your existing IT environment. They're well skilled. It's just, like I said, a natural progression of workload management.
Because what I guess what I've seen or heard is that there's sort of different choices as far as who can build it or who should manage it, right? Some organizations are having their DevOps teams do it. I've heard of this new function called platform ops. But I guess what you're saying is, don't overlook the IT teams. They're, they have some, they're kind of good at this. They've been, they live and breathe infrastructure.
Right.
Yeah. Is that kind of, what would be maybe sort of the pros and cons of having IT build and manage versus these other teams?
Well, IT is already familiar with whatever regulations you run under. So if you're running under PCI, whatever solution you pick is going to have to be able to pass a PCI audit, right? So they're already doing that.
And I'm not a IT pro, so I don't even know what PCI is. So
well, PCI,
I assume it's a security
credit card information.
Okay, all right.
Right. So if you're dealing with any sort of regulated information, identity, credit cards, finances, so medical records, so on and so forth, you fall under a number of compliance regulations. using vSphere with Tanzu, that's going to be, again, a natural progression of workload management, right? As opposed to if I build everything from scratch, I have to start from scratch to do all of that. And does the Kubernetes team, we'll just call them the Kubernetes team, do they have the skill set to meet that challenge?
And do I need to buy would I need to buy new infrastructure then too, right?
Exactly. So the real big takeaway here from a kind of a persona sort of thing is, I think what we're seeing is you have your existing vSphere IT folks. At the opposite end, you have the developers who are essentially the users, but somewhere in the middle are the Kubernetes managers or Kubernetes operators or some other sort of named function. And their job is to set up the build environments and create the appropriate resources. They can do all of that while leveraging the capabilities of vSphere without having to know vSphere. And IT can see the workloads and manage the needs of the vSphere environment. They can see all these new workloads and the impact that they may or may not be having, and they can provide the governance around what the developers want to use and what the Kubernetes management folks want to use.
And on top of that, they're also very familiar with policies, for example, placement policies. They are the ones who are able to decide like which storage should we be using for this deployment. They are able to set resource quotas. How do we want to divide our hardware? How can we utilize it the best? These are all the things that they have been doing for all these years prior to this. And the only difference is that they have a different kind of workload to set this up for. So they can really utilize what they've been doing without having to know everything about the Kubernetes and application side, but they have all these skills that the other personas, as Mike has mentioned, so the developers and maybe the DevOps people don't necessarily have. So it's a combination of those skills that comes together with a platform like that.
Yeah. So okay,
it's really one of those things where the sum of the parts is greater, right?
Yeah, I was just about to say, better together sort of thing.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you, Katarina and Mike. That wraps up this episode of the Kubernetes Case Files Commentary. Thanks for joining us and look forward to seeing you next time.